afternoon and welcome to SaaS Innovate. We are so happy to have you all here. My name is Joy DeBolt and I work with our marketing department. I have the pleasure of presenting today's session speaker, Ray Otar from our wonderful partner, Deloitte. We're very excited for this session, so let's give Ray a very warm welcome.
Thanks very much, Joy. Thanks everyone for taking the time today to join this session. Talk a little bit about some of the key, or I shouldn't say key, but top topics for considerations when embarking on a SaaS modernization journey. In our agenda today, we'll have a little bit of an overview, some of the work that we do. We'll also talk a little bit about accelerators. I'm bringing accelerators up to the front because they're actually critical and important to enabling a smoother journey, if you will, through a modernization activity. This is an interesting slide I've kind of always used here, right? Technology modernization is pretty easy to do, right? The answer is no. But it can be less burdenful, if you will, when you have a good plan in place, enough foresight, if you will, to deliver as best as possible a program for modernization that makes sense. A lot of technology programs requires a lot of complex planning, coordination, deep understanding of your current systems, your future needs, and along with substantial resource allocation that can strain operations. A lot of strategic planning and stakeholder engagement is very important upfront. It can help your organization navigate the modernization journey pretty successfully. Ultimately, we want to make sure that we're getting long-term benefits out of the investments that we're putting our dollars and our efforts into. This is not going to be a technical presentation, but more so business realities, curation of best practices, and helping you to think a little bit differently before you start planning on going through a modernization journey. We've delivered a number of modernizations around the world. And what you see here on this slide is basically the culmination of some best practices and a roadmap that you can start considering. You know, in the early days, without this roadmap, bit of a struggle. Starts, stops, pulling together the lessons learned have been critical and important. So as you can see here, we've developed accelerators as well too to suit the needs of some of the stages. We've partnered with SaaS. There are SaaS accelerators. There are some Deloitte accelerators as well too. But if you go through this journey, you always want to start with something, at least what we've seen now here, is a bit of a migration strategy. Where do you want to go? Where do you want to head? What can you do to further enhance your visibility into your migration strategy? Requirements and discovery, critical. You need to understand what you're shooting for as a target. And then technical architecture, lots of considerations, and I'll talk through more of these later on. Deployments, configurations, very important. How do you want the business to operate? How do you want the technology environment to operate? And then finally is the migration to Vaya itself, right? And then migrating to Vaya, one step, I always say, start small, build on your successes, gain trust, and then grow within the organization. And then finally, a scaled migration. When you've known that the adaptation to all of the nuances within an organization, I would say no two organizations are identical. There's slight differences across everyone. I say build on those small successes, adjust, calibrate along the way, and then prepare for a scaled migration, because some of the biggest value and benefit you'll get out of your migration is also retiring your legacy environments as well too. And then finally, once you've done a migration, there's a consideration: how do I make the asset work even better? How do I optimize it? How do I improve runtimes, delivery of payloads? There's tons of opportunity for optimization of code. I'm just going to highlight a couple of the accelerators that we've commonly used with our clients. First one, I think most folks might be familiar with SaaS content assessment. It's a great tool to shine a light on the estate of what you have. Many times there's code, there's data, there's programs, there's processes all over the place. How do you put your arms around those and wrangle those into one spot and have clear line visibility into those? Enterprise Session Monitor, if you want to look at live workloads, understanding their performance, how they're actually being used, great tool from SaaS that gives you visibility into that. We also have developed some additional accelerators on top of the SaaS environment. So we have a Avaya Assist tool. So what our Avaya Assist tool does is it helps to focus in on the critical workloads that are actually running your business. I'll talk a little bit more about it later on, but over time, there's a collection of data and code that not everybody has full line visibility on. And there is a rationalization exercise that you need to consider when you're doing a migration. Our tool helps you gain visibility into the code that's actually running your business. We also have another tool which is built with generative AI. It is our Avaya Migration Utilities. It helps to document our code. One of the examples I can say is that a lot of code goes into production, people come, people go, changes are made to it and so forth, and then the fidelity of what was originally there is lost. We've built an LLM that will actually read your base SaaS code, generate workflow diagrams, and build the business logic and language to help you understand what's actually in the environment as well too. And then of course, some of our cloud accelerators, we found that deployments can take a long time. We're trying to effectively build the easy button, if you will. So tailoring a deployment, leveraging things like Terraform, IAC, DAC, our goal is to basically spin up environments on demand. And I'll talk a little bit more about spinning up environments on demand when I get into some of the cost conversations as well too. So some of the topics I'll talk about today is around some of the business objectives, gap analysis and strategy, data management, risk management, training and change management, assessment, architecture and planning, code assessment, testing and validation, and finally project governance. So from a business objectives perspective, part of the goals that we've seen many organizations focus in on are these are the top three, if you will. Alignments, you want to make sure that you're aligned with your strategic IT and business objectives. Why this is important is that many times I've seen individual organizations drive a conversation forward, be it IT or business. I think the most successful outcomes that we have seen is where business and IT are at the table together, and they're expressing their challenges, their goals, where they need to go together, and they're both bought in. So times there will be bumps along the road, right? And they need to be closer together in working. So effectively, you want to set clear business objectives that align with your migration and your broader IT strategies as well too. This helps to ensure support for the organization's long-term vision and maximizes the ROI on the new technology. Maximizing operational efficiency and performance. You want to focus in on operational efficiency that optimizes process and resource utilization during the migration. This all leads to improved analytics, performance, reduced processing times, and efficient use of the computational resources that you have in Avaya. Enhancing data-driven decision making. Leveraging Avaya's advanced analytics enhances a lot of that data-driven decision-making process. This all results in more accurate insights, faster time to value, and strategic advantages through the predictive and prescriptive analytics processes. You can see here a lot of the business outcomes. You're focused in on cost efficiency, resource optimization, strengthened competitive advantages. You want to make sure you're increasing your ability to be agile, and flexible as a business outcome. Technical outcomes, you want to make sure that you're enhancing your analytical capabilities for the organization, improving the user experience and the collaboration, and future-proofing a bit of that infrastructure. I talked a little bit about cost controls. Cost and efficiency is very important. We've seen a lot of clients that have been running their workloads always on systems. We've developed strategies to work with our clients for rapid deployments that allow them to spin up environments before people enter the workday, and at the end of the workday, shut them down. That cycle continues throughout the week, potentially even to the weekends. And what that's effectively doing is it's shutting down the costs of servers running when they're not needed, nobody's using them, and so forth. So that's an optimization pattern, as an example that we do for our clients. You might ask as well too, what happens if I do need it in the off hours when it is shut down? There's enablements for on-demand call-ups of these environments as well too, and they can be rapidly deployed in like 30 minutes or less. Assessments. Goals of an assessment. You want to make sure that you have a good comprehensive understanding of your existing environments. I'd say assessing the existing code base gives you a good visibility on the data assets, the inventory of those assets, and any redundancies and discrepancies that you might find preparing for your migration. I think one of the biggest things to consider is knowing what you have in your environment. I talked a little bit about this earlier. Content assessment is a great accelerator to do that. There's two schools of thought that I kind of go through as a bit of a regulatory versus a non-regulatory type approach. So in a regulatory environment, I need to be acutely aware of the data and the code that I need to keep for retention policy. In a non-regulatory type environment, I can loosen the controls on that a bit. And if maybe a retention policy in a regulatory environment says 7 years, I've got to keep data and code for that long, I've got to follow that. Anything older than that, I can potentially move off or get rid of and completely destroy. In a non-regulatory environment, that might be only 3 years as a company policy for maintaining that information. There are situations where they're needed beyond those periods. We have strategies that we've helped to take that code and data and even potentially move it into low-cost storage devices that are recallable on demand. So there's a bit of a cost takeout narrative that goes along with that as well too. Risk mitigation and planning. A detailed assessment, it identifies all the potential migration risks that you will potentially face, enabling a proactive approach in your migration strategy. You want to make sure that you're creating a very realistic timeline and resource plan for a smoother transition. The assessments, the upfront homework helps you to plan for that very, very easily. Optimization and modernization opportunities, review all your assets. That will help you understand, as an example, if there are long-running processes today that are impacting your ability to go and meet a regulatory filing or a delivery for an internal business stakeholder. If that's a critical problem for you today, leverage the opportunity in the migration to identify those workloads that can be optimized. There are additional capacity capabilities that you would get in VIA now of leveraging CAS computing, apart from just regular CPU computing. So take the opportunity to make sure that you're aligning the outcomes for your business with the optimization patterns that you want to bring forward in your migration strategy. Gap analysis and strategy. One thing you want to do is a couple of goals are really identifying the current and future state discrepancies. Are there old ways of working that need to transform to new ways of working? You want to make sure that you're developing a good comprehensive migration roadmap. Are there things that you have to map out in your timeline, like the first slide there, again, best practices of how we go from starting the migration, assessment, all the way to delivery of a scaled migration. What are the key things within the business that you need to address, make different change in your migration? The last thing we want to do is go through migrations and fail midway through. We can get as enough insight as we can today to prevent a lot of those things from happening in the future. Your roadmap is going to be critical. It's all the gates, everything that you need to do to set yourself up for success. You want to make sure that in that roadmap, you're identifying all the stakeholders, all the folks that you actually need to interact with, whether it's from business stakeholders, technical stakeholders. They need to be part of the story, the journey. There's going to be people along the way, external vendors, external party holders, user acceptance testing, and then finally into production. You must have a roadmap knowing where you want to go. And everybody needs to be aligned to that, because the folks that don't get aligned to it are the ones that are going to call out the gaps, and they will be a bit problematic, if you will, in the journey going forward. Minimize disruption and optimize your resource allocation. This is a pretty important one, because a lot of times that we go in to do modernizations for clients, we find it a struggle getting resource allocation from our clients. I think we have to remember that they all have a day job to do. But simply getting the right amount of commitment from our business stakeholders, our clients, is critical to this success. Why it's so important is that we don't want to just do a migration then hand it over to our clients. We want them to be on the journey with us as well too. So as they actually get more and more involved, they actually get to see some of the challenges that we face going through the modernization journeys with uniqueness at our client sites. They also get ready for preparing for taking on day two operations, also enabling centers of excellence within the organizations as well too, to help support the users in new ways of working. So some of the business outcomes for these, we'll end up getting a good targeted resource utilization. We'll reduce amount of our operational disruption. Stakeholder confidence starts to rise when there's a roadmap and people are aligned to it. And it creates more readiness for future innovation. So if you want to start exploring and innovating with the solution, delivering a robust target environment that has identified a lot of the gaps and you've mitigated a lot of risk with those, it sets the organization up for success. Technical outcomes, you'll hopefully plan for a successful and efficient migration. Improved system performance. So system tuning is also a pretty important thing. A lot of times we will see folks, when it comes to performance testing, they will have, I guess, a desire to do things equal or better. I think the hard part is identifying what those outcomes for better means for them. Are they tied to business objectives? Are they expected to deliver things faster, sooner? Potentially be able to do more hypothesis, scenario testing before you get to an outcome that is meaningful for your business as well too. Architecture and planning. Designing a scalable and flexible architecture is pretty critical. I think what we do want to ensure is that when we're working with clients, we need to understand what are the growth needs beyond what the current needs are. You want to make sure that you have an environment that is flexible and scalable for the future. I think the promise of cloud helps to enable that. Today, I think a lot of the on-prem data center type deployments of SAS 9.4, they're not as easy to scale, whether you got to add CPU, RAM, and so forth. Effectively in cloud, you should be able to just dial up what you need, add more nodes to your node pools, and just go, right? So create that scalability for the architecture as well too. You also want to potentially consider like multiple environment deployments as well too. That's a pretty important one. And then when you get to those, think about development environments, sandbox environments, acceptance testing environments, production environments, disaster recovery. Plan for those accordingly. And of course, you want to make sure you optimize your resource utilization, cost efficiency when deploying these environments as well too. This comes back to that strategy of spin up, spin down on-demand environments to help the organization control costs as well too. The other one too, one of the goals is to ensure robust security and compliance. It's important. I think data security, privacy is becoming more and more prevalent. It's never really gone away. I think leveraging the cloud infrastructure and deferring a lot of the risk of any cybersecurity threats and so forth, it's important to leverage your cloud providers with that as well too. They have the frameworks in place. One of the other things to also consider too is internal security policies that need to get implemented. You may even have third-party tools that need to integrate within an architecture as well too. So some of the business outcomes, you hope to achieve cost-effective operations, increase your stakeholder confidence, of course, and improve that posture for security and compliance. Technically, you want to make sure you have a robust and future-proofed infrastructure as well too. Optimize the performance, the efficiency, constant monitoring to make sure that you're getting the right throughput that you need for processes that you're delivering payloads for. And then also improve your user experience and collaboration by opening up, integrating tools as well too. One of the other things as well too is that on the initial build of environments, one of the things that you do is you go in with a mindset of, I think this is what I want, and you deploy them. And then you realize you could have under-provisioned, even over-provisioned, or it's just right. It's important to also pay attention to the capacity workloads, consumptions, so that you can scale them accordingly to what your business need is for the organization. So optimizing the cost is important by knowing how much you need to use, when and where. You might even find in some clients we've worked with, they have peak workload demands for regulatory processes that take a week to run. So what they'll do is they'll spin up additional computing for those periods to actually shorten the window. There is optimization of that code that runs as well too, so you can actually run the same code using different calculation engines in a shorter period of time. So there's a bit of homework that goes into optimization that we'll need to look at. Data management. Data management's kind of the foundation of everything in these modernizations. Always take the time to ensure that your data has good quality and integrity. A lot of times we've been at clients and they think the data is good, it's curated, it's persisted into a zone. If it's not, take the time to step back and reassess needs for the organization as well too. We've seen a lot of clients, I wouldn't say pausing, but they would step back slightly and look at how they can leverage these modernization opportunities to refactor their data so it's better served for their downstream clients. A big concept of data mesh, but more frequently in analytics is data products served for a specific community is becoming more and more real in these transformations. So they'll focus in on creating data so it has a common understanding across the analytical needs for the organization. So if there's an opportunity to do that in your migration, do it. Streamline your data integration and accessibility. So if you've got a bunch of folks maybe using EG to build code, prepare data, some using DI Studio, some using base SAS, streamline that so it's in a common process that's maybe even controlled, because a lot of times I've seen with some of our clients is that there's this one person that delivers data every day at or every day at like 8 a.m. in the morning, and then one day he either gets sick or maybe even wins the lottery, and that data doesn't show up anymore, right? And then everybody's like, well, where did Joe go and what, those are candidates for wrapping controls around predictability for data in your ecosystem that people are dependent on. Part of our assessment tools, we help you to identify the code linked to the data, create the lineage, so we can actually show you if Joe created a persistent data set and that's being used by 20 people, identify that, flag it as a candidate for controls so you have predictability around others being dependent on it for consumption. Enhance your data governance and compliance. Again, there's a lot of data that's being used, created by folks in environments that isn't always truly needed. Some people build it for themselves, some people build it for others, but they don't necessarily have a cataloging mechanism and ability to go and search and see where data has been made fit for purpose or has value to the organization. So if there's a way of kind of streamlining that, applying a governance structure on top of the data, meeting compliance needs, take the opportunity to do that as well too. Business outcomes for data management, stronger data governance and compliance just simply translates to more control over your information and how it's being used in the organization. Efficient data operations, there could be processes that are so inefficient out there in persisting data. You want to take the opportunity to make sure that those are being adjusted, rationalized, and used in the most appropriate way for your organization. Technical outcomes, as you adjust the processes for data, you're going to improve the data quality, the reliability, the dependencies for data will have controls around them. It'll improve your data accessibility and integration, so whether data needs to stay in the system, even potentially exit the system as well too. And then it also helps to enhance your analytical capabilities, so you can actually understand more and more about the data that's going on in your organization today, understand how many people are actually using it, build controlled processes around it, create more predictability around your data for the organization. Code assessment, we talked about a little bit earlier on. This code assessment is very, very important. You want to make sure that you're understanding a lot of your code that you have in the organization today. There may be potentially some code compatibility issues that you run into in doing a migration. There may be SaaS procs that people have been using for years that may not be fit for purpose anymore, and there may be a new procedure. There are potential opportunities there for transforming that code to operate differently, faster, delivering better outcomes, improved algorithms. You want to make sure that you're identifying those up front in your code compatibility when migrating to VIA. A large percentage of the code just lifts and shifts as is, but if you have the opportunity to do a transformation and improve the quality and outcome of that code, use new processes, take the time to do it if that fits the timeline. If not, there's always the opportunity to do it after as well too. And I talked about that there. It's the optimization of code for performance and efficiency. And again, this is a pretty common one that we see, is that ensure that your code is compliant to the company's best practices. I think a lot of people have varying degrees of coding standards, and people come and go in organizations, and when people have to pick things up, there's a lot of unpacking and trying to understand what this person did and what that person did. I've seen organizations start to embark on a center of excellence to help apply the controls around the code that gets documented, stored, used in the organization. It's mapped back to business processes. It helps people to also unlock a little bit more insight into the business as well too. A center of excellence is important in a sense that if somebody doesn't know how to do something, or I would say doesn't know how to code in a certain way or something to that effect, you should be able to tap into your internal organization where they're enforcing practices, things like promotions to productions, code documentation, change management within the code, if you're not using something like a GitHub. That's pretty important for a lot of organizations, and I've seen a lot of organizations miss it. Talking through and ensuring that there are standards for the coding best practices, data storage practices, and so forth, even data preparation practices, is critical for you optimizing the way that you operate the business, not just today, but for the future and when processes evolve. So some of the business outcomes, we continue to build on stakeholder confidence. We want to make sure that we're also ensuring that you're going to start to see a reduction of errors, security vulnerabilities, like those are critical outcomes for the business. And then for the technical outcomes, we'll start to see a lot of seamless code transition. So again, building the best practices, building playbooks for helping folks to move from old to new. We're going to see enhanced code performance as well too, when you get the opportunity to adjust the code, migrate the code, tune it, using new calculation engines as well too. And of course, we'll get improved code quality and maintainability within the organization. So if you have others that can jump in and jump out, look at the code, diagnose if something went wrong, maybe a data feed stopped, go back, what's the restartability? They have the procedural guides within the standardized code documentation. Risk management. Pretty big one. Everyone can probably agree that things pop up all over the place. But how do you get enough foresight to avoid a lot of those? So always think about identifying and assessing what are the potential risks that you might face. Budgetary constraints, technical constraints, resource constraints. Make sure those are upfront to consider as part of your risks. You want to develop and implement mitigation strategies. So if you know things will happen, what is your course of action for remediation? How can you improve your stakeholder confidence and so forth? So be overly prepared, expect the unexpected. And the other thing is around keeping your stakeholders engaged. A lot of times I've seen that going through projects is great, that project teams are working, they're doing their thing, and then all of a sudden they hit a roadblock. So while there might be executive communications that go out in an email and so forth, that's probably not enough because not everybody has a full time to digest a lot of the context. I've leveraged enhanced processes where we're just simply getting on a call, right? And talking through things with stakeholders. And that's important because that's their commitment and buy-in. They want to see the value of what a program is that's being delivered. So just increasing that stakeholder communication is critical for the success. Keeping people aware of what's about to come or what is happening, and timing is all critical for that at this point, right? I've been in a project recently where folks were insulated from some of the issues that were going on through a deployment. And it came as a big shock to them. But for the working team, it wasn't a shock. So you can imagine there's been some diffusing of elevated blood pressures, if you will, at times. So keep them involved sooner. So business outcomes, improve stakeholder trust, engagement, keeping people involved, enhanced decision making. So as people can have a little bit more foresight, they will start to think differently. They can start to anticipate challenges and help the program. Increase your operational resilience. Just make sure you're well prepared for what's about to come, and then have as much foresight as you can. And technical outcomes, we want to reduce the amount of migration disruptions and improve a little bit of the compliance and security assurance. Testing and validation, probably the most critical part of a lot of things that are happening when you're doing a migration. You want to make sure that there's functional equivalence from what people were used to. You want to ensure that you're identifying and resolving any performance issues. A lot of people, again, They have that notion of equal or better is what they want to see in terms of the performance, the experience as well too of using the tools. And then always validate your data integrity and security posture as well too, because that's going to be critical in making sure that you can check the boxes for use cases that need to go through that approval process. The outcomes of user acceptance testing effectively is what your checkbox is, and that's your green light to go into production. So again, stakeholder confidence is a business outcome, improved data integrity and security posturing, and our technical outcomes are focused on the analytics operations. It's reliable, optimized system performance, of course, too, to meet the demands and workloads, and then it'll help to obviously reduce a lot of the post-migration issues. So catch as much of it as you can way up front and be prepared for promotion to production there. Training and change management. This is another very, very key important part. As you start to migrate to new tools, using these new tools, there are differences. I think for some folks that are familiar with Enterprise Guide or even base SaaS, it's a thin client, operates on a desktop, connects to the server. Now you're changing the way that people work, and you're now going through a single pane through a web interface. And that web interface now has access to all the old tools. It's all the same functionality behind, but the interface is different for navigating how you're going to be working with things. So you want to make sure that when you're doing training for your teammates, what you're doing is you're getting them familiar with the tools, but more importantly, at the right time. So as they're ready to go into things like user acceptance training or even post-production adoption, you want to make sure that training is done in time for them as well too. The other things too around fostering a culture of continuous improvement and innovation, that center of excellence really helps an organization to adopt. We try to ensure that as we go through migrations, especially from the UAT part into production, we have team members that are there with us that are supporting the environment after. We plan for that to make sure that we're cross-training them. So on day 2 operations, when they want to take everything on their own, they're a high-performing team supporting the organization as well too. So part of the business outcomes, higher adoption rates, reduced resistance. That's all part of change management as well too, setting people up for the change that's about to happen. Minimal disruption to business operations. Nobody wants to go in and go live with something and then everything goes wrong. No, we want to make sure that we're minimizing any transition experience. There's not necessarily a 100% right way of doing things, but a big bang is not probably the best way to do things. I always say when you're doing migrations, transitions, start small. Build on those small successes, learn more about the organization's unique differences, build them into playbooks, enable others to do their own migrations with playbooks, help them transition across, and be there to support them when they hit roadblocks, right? So phone a friend support in these type things. If I do the transition for all of our clients, they're not going to understand how the new world works until they go through some training and then experimentation on their own. We want to support them through the transition journey alongside them. And I think in the last slide here, project governance. This is kind of the connective tissue for everything, right? This is the glue that holds it all together. I think a strong project governance is critical to every successful project, and that's committed governance. The governance team is really focused with all the stakeholders is to align on the organizational objectives. You're trying to improve your posture, deliver a better outcome, potentially shore up some operational risk, whatever that is. Make sure that everything that you're doing is tied to your organizational objectives for the program. It's critical. If you don't, you go off the rails on things like this. Nobody wants to see a project go sideways, but what you also want to do is make sure that it's delivering core value back to the organization. You want to enhance the decision making and accountability, so when you do hit bumps along the road, you can actually have the right people at the table at the right time to make the decisions, to act with urgency. And then mitigate as much risk and manage change effectively up front. The governance will help to achieve that. And of course, some of the outcomes that you'll achieve from this is, alignment, value realization, improve project efficiency and clarity, and deliver effective risk management and change controls to the project. The stakeholders, again, they want to see success for everything. So keep building that confidence for your stakeholders along the journey as well too. And then sustain that operational continuity as you transition into a production and roll off. So that's the end. Thank you very much for listening. I will open it up to any Q&A if anybody has anything that they want to talk about.
Hi. Question about the cost optimization for spinning up, spinning down.
Yeah.
Just from a percentage perspective, what kind of percentage reduction in infrastructure costs do your clients see when you do that?
Spin up, spin down, 20 to 30%.
20, 30? Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, I actually had a follow-up question to the spin up and spin down, actually. How do you manage that for, say, like a more global organization? Somebody that, say, like, are working in multiple time zones and things like that.
Yeah, great question. There are automated schedules that are delivered for all of the Terraform scripts. So you can schedule those across time zones as well too, right? And then the on-demand capacity, so somebody needs to work on a Saturday or Sunday, that is like, you can do an integration with ServiceNow ticket, that gets executed right away. And there's also a control as well too, is that if somebody walks away from the environment for more than 2 hours, it'll automatically save and shut down and ready for spin back up again.
If there are no other questions, thank you all so much. Ray will be here if you have any questions that you'd like to come up
Absolutely.
and talk to him about. And please place your headsets back on the table. Thank you so much.
Thank you.